Imagine being like 5 years old, and your mother successfully convinces your entire family that you are a monster.
Yeah, a monster who just shouldn't be spoken to.
Right. And not just for a day or, a week, but for a decade. Welcome to today's deep dive. And to you, the learner, listening right now, we are really glad you're here with us.
Absolutely, because today's material isn't, it's not a textbook or a clinical study.
No, it's a firsthand, deeply personal source document. It's titled The Architecture of Isolation, A Mother's Secret Campaign.
And our mission today is really to explore how psychological isolation is constructed within a closed system.
Yeah, and how false narratives can just entirely overwrite a person's reality. It's wild.
It really is. So to set the stage, the document's authored by a 21-year-old woman. She's reflecting on her childhood.
Right, a childhood shared with her identical twin, who is obviously also 21, and two other sisters who are 20 and 18.
And the crucial context we have to establish right away is the baseline of this household.
Yeah, we have to talk about that baseline.
Because it wasn't just a normal, slightly dysfunctional home, the baseline was extreme, constant abuse. Physical, mental, financial, and, verbal abuse.
All orchestrated by the mother against all four girls. Okay, let's unpack this, because reading through someone dissecting their own trauma with that kind of analytical precision is just astounding.
It's incredibly brave. She's able to see the mechanics of it all.
Yeah. The author explains that while they all suffered under that, shared umbrella of abuse, her specific personal nightmare, this architecture of isolation, started with a single arbitrary line.
A line drawn in the sand when she was just a toddler. She was literally 5 years old.
5. I mean, at 5, your cognitive map of the world is completely dependent on your caregivers.
Exactly. Kids that age, they don't have independent verification systems for truth. If a parent dictates a reality, well, that reality is absolute.
Which brings us to the inciting incident, the actual mechanics of how this exclusion was deployed. And it's deceptively simple.
Right. The mom gathers all the kids together.
Yeah, she gathers them, looks at the 5-year-old author, and just yells, "Not you, go to your room."
And that one moment, it's the deployment of a highly specific variable into the whole abusive system.
Because an hour later, the sisters emerge from the room, and they're acting, like, incredibly weird. Terrified, really.
Yeah, they tell the author, Mom told us something serious about you, but they just completely refuse to elaborate.
And when the author goes to the mother for answers, complete silence, she is entirely ignored.
Which is devastating for a 5-year-old.
I have a really hard time wrapping my head around the logistics here. It's like a forced psychological quarantine.
That's a really good way to describe it.
But I need to push back on how practical that actually is. I mean, a 5-year-old lives in the same house, eats at the same table, asks a million questions a day.
Oh, totally. They're constantly present.
So how does a parent effectively make a child the subject of a dark family secret, while simultaneously hiding the secret from the child herself? It feels like an impossible plate-spinning act to keep up.
It does seem impossible, especially if you look at it as an operation targeting the isolated child.
Right.
But what's fascinating here is that the mother's tactic isn't primarily about the 5-year-old. She's using secret keeping to control the other sisters.
Wait, so the target is actually the audience, not the victim.
Precisely. By making the sisters complicit in a secret, she creates an instant us versus them dynamic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in clinical psychology, we look at this through the lens of triangulation. It's a manipulation tactic where communication between two people is controlled by a third person.
So by giving the sisters this forbidden knowledge, the mother binds them to her.
Exactly. The isolated child is the focal point, but she's leveraging information asymmetry to basically deputize the other kids.
It's almost like the mother uploaded a virus into the family's operating system.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it.
Yeah. The secret is the malicious code, and it turns the sisters into unwitting firewall programs. Their fear makes them execute the program, blocking the author out completely.
Right. And we see triangulation in everyday life, like a toxic boss playing two employees against each other.
Oh, for sure.
But here, it's weaponized against developing brains. In an abusive system, proximity to the abuser's favor is a literal survival mechanism.
So the sisters comply because the alternative is turning the abuser's attention onto themselves.
Exactly. If they break the rule, they become the target.
But the byproduct of that firewall is just this massive psychological void for the author, because the secret was never revealed, right?
No, it was kept hidden for years.
And over the next few years, all the sisters entirely pull away. The text notes that even her identical twin refused to look her way.
Severing that specific bond is particularly brutal. Identical twins often share this profound, almost symbiotic attachment in early childhood.
Right, they're together constantly.
So artificially amputating that connection without providing a reason, it introduces an immense level of psychological distress.
And a human brain, let alone a little 5-year-old's brain, hates a void. If there's a gap in information, it will always try to fill it.
Oh, absolutely. We are meaning-making machines. It's rooted in this concept called cognitive closure.
Meaning we prefer a terrible answer over no answer at all.
Exactly. We desperately prefer a concrete answer to anxiety of the unknown. And combine that with early childhood egocentrism, where kids inherently believe they are the direct cause of everything happening around them, the outcome is inevitable.
They turn the blame inward.
Yes. The child will internalize the blame just to make the world make sense.
And that leads to a detail in the text that is just so highly specific and striking. To rationalize why her entire family has suddenly shut her out, this 5-year-old concludes that she probably has cancer.
Yeah.
She reasons that her family wanted her to, quote, die alone so that they don't get sad about me.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it illustrates how the absence of information operates as a supreme tool of psychological manipulation.
It's so tragic.
It is, because when you deprive someone of facts, their own mind does the abuser's work for them.
And looking at the logic of it is staggering to me. A 5-year-old invents a fatal medical tragedy because it is somehow less terrifying than the idea that her own family simply despises her for no reason.
Well, think about it. A fatal illness is a tragedy of circumstance, right?
Right.
But being hated by your own mother and siblings for absolutely no reason, that is a tragedy of identity.
Well, wow. Yeah.
She chose a fatal circumstance to protect her core identity. It allows her to maintain the illusion that her family's rejection is rooted in, like, preemptive grief rather than malice.
So it preserves a tiny sliver of attachment, a narrative where they still fundamentally care about her.
Exactly. It's heartbreaking, but mechanically, it is a masterclass in psychological survival for a kid.
But a closed system based on an artificial narrative requires constant energy to maintain. Right.
Huge amounts of energy, yes.
And it inherently becomes unstable as kids grow up. They gain new language skills. External realities start applying pressure.
Right. The internal rationalization only holds up as long as the environment doesn't challenge it.
Which brings us to the fracturing of the facade. The first major crack in this architecture happens when the author is 11.
The sibling fight.
Yeah. Detail the fight for us. It starts as just typical kid stuff, right?
It does. But during the argument, the sisters weaponize that invisible boundary. They look at each other, smirk, and say, "Remember what Mom told us about her that day?"
Ugh. And the author is triggered instantly to tears. She goes and confronts the mother.
And the mother's reaction completely breaks the pattern here. Instead of ignoring the author like usual, she snaps, yells at her, but then furiously turns on the sisters.
Right, she starts screaming and threatening them.
This raises an important question. Why panic now? The mother had successfully maintained this quarantine for 6 years.
Because the sisters broke the cardinal rule. They acknowledged the firewall out loud.
Exactly. Her sudden aggression toward her own enforcers reveals the fundamental vulnerability of the entire system.
So her power relied entirely on the secret remaining an unspoken, terrifying specter.
Yes. By using the secret as a taunt, they dragged the invisible architecture into the light. Her rage wasn't about the sisters being cruel to the author.
No, it was sheer panic over losing control.
Right, because if the enforcers start talking about the rules, they might start questioning the rules.
But the tragedy is, the author being 11 and still stuck in that void, misinterprets the mother's panic.
She thinks it confirms her worst fears.
Yeah. The text notes this incident only worsened her conviction that something was deeply wrong with her. Her logic was like, if the secret is so bad it makes Mom act like this, I really must be a monster.
The true breaking point requires an external shock strong enough to override that deeply conditioned reality.
And that shock finally arrives at age 14.
The shared trauma.
Right. Fast forward to age 14, and the source text describes a day where the author and her identical twin are physically targeted and badly hurt by the mother.
It's a horrible event, but the shared severity of that physical trauma momentarily shatters the mother's artificial division.
Because physical pain is a profound equalizer.
It really is. It forces the nervous system into the present moment, bypassing years of psychological conditioning. And for the first time in nearly a decade, the twin speaks to the author as an ally.
Yeah, she talks about how they need to put a stop to the abuse,
Mm-hmm.
and the author realizes The firewall is down.
She seizes the window.
She asks the burning question she's carried since she was 5. What did Mom say that day?
And the twin finally delivers the answer.
She told us that you're crazy, that we have to stop talking to you and act like you don't exist.
Now, it's years of reality defined by a single lie. It's a devastating revelation.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The author points out this tragic irony. She describes her younger self as the sweetest kid ever who wouldn't hurt a fly.
Right.
Just imagine the cognitive dissonance of knowing you're a sweet, loving sibling, yet being treated like a dangerous pariah by everyone around you.
Navigating that friction just destroys a person's sense of self-trust.
How so?
Well, when your environment constantly invalidates your lived experience, your brain adapts by assuming its own internal sensors are broken.
So even when you discover the lie, the doubt is still there.
Exactly. The physiological doubt remains wired into your nervous system. You just learn to doubt your own perception of reality.
Discovering that initial lie at 14 was a massive breakthrough. But the text reveals that realizing the sheer scale of the manipulation years later is the final devastating piece of the puzzle.
Which brings us to the present-day perspective. The author is now 21.
Right. And remarkably, her relationship with her sisters is great now. They survived, they reconnected, but recently she was looking back at her childhood and decided to ask her twin about that situation again.
To really nail down the history. And the twin reveals that the firewall wasn't just installed with one command at age 5.
No. The bombshell is that the mother constantly reminded them for years to ignore the author's existence.
She actively reinforced the narrative that the author was a crazy monster they shouldn't go near.
The author uses a direct quote to summarize this. She says, "My mom was dedicated."
The concept of dedication here highlights the industrial scale of the manipulation.
So what does this all mean? Consider the exhausting energy required for a parent to maintain a daily campaign of exclusion against a toddler for years.
It requires an almost unimaginable expenditure of daily energy to orchestrate that level of isolation in a shared house.
Waking up every day, looking at a toddler, and actively running a psychological counterinsurgency campaign. Checking to ensure the siblings aren't playing together, it's breathtaking.
It transforms the mother from a reactive, abusive parent into an active architect of an alternative reality.
But I have to admit, I do struggle slightly with the sisters' complicity here. I mean, as they got older, 7, 10, 13, shouldn't they have seen through it?
Yeah.
How do you participate in a daily campaign against your own twin?
It's hard to grasp, but we have to view their complicity through the lens of developmental trauma.
Okay, unpack that for me.
A child's primary biological drive is attachment. To a child, attachment literally equals physical survival.
Right, because they can't fend for themselves.
Exactly. And in a chaotic, violently abusive home, the mother is the absolute authority holding the keys to that survival. If the authority says the sky is green, your brain wires itself to see green.
So the sisters were drafted into this architecture.
Yes. They were victims surviving under a different but equally controlling set of tactics. They were basically conscripts in someone else's war.
That paints such a dark picture. One child was the designated scapegoat, and the others were conscripted as her wardens.
And the most insidious part of an architecture like that is its permanence.
The text actually confirms exactly that. The author notes that the damage lingers today.
The physical house might be gone, but the foundation remains.
Yeah, she says that deep, visceral feeling of, there's something wrong with me, never entirely vanished, even at 21, with a great sibling relationship.
This happens because narratives assigned to us in childhood actually shape the physical neural pathways in our developing brains.
They dictate how we view ourselves, not just how others treat us.
Exactly. Long after we leave the environment, or long after the narrative is proven objectively false, our emotional memory often still operates within the constraints of those invisible walls.
We keep reacting to a firewall that was uninstalled years ago.
Precisely.
Well, we've covered incredible ground with this source text today. From a 5-year-old excluded in a hallway, to a child assuming she has cancer, to a 21-year-old uncovering a dedicated, multi-year campaign of isolation by her own mother.
And we really have to acknowledge the author's resilience here. To survive that closed system and successfully rebuild genuine connections with her sisters is extraordinary.
Truly extraordinary. And for you, listening right now, exploring these extreme mechanisms isn't just about understanding one family's trauma.
No, it's about recognizing how easily a false narrative can be constructed and enforced.
Right. Because understanding that is the required first step in dismantling any unfair narratives you might be living under.
You cannot dismantle an architecture you don't realize you're living inside.
Exactly. Which leads to a final thought I want you to mull over as you finish this deep dive. We've dissected the architect of this specific family's isolation today.
The mother.
Right. But think about the invisible architecture in your own life. Who were the architects of your family's dynamics? What unspoken rules or secret roles were programmed into you when you were too young to question the code?
It's a profound question.
It is. And most importantly, are you still unknowingly running that software today?